Riverside.
Welcome to Dance Talk with Joanne Carey, where the dance world connects, the conversations inspire, and where we are keeping them real. I'm your host, Joanne Carey, and today I am back with Jarod Lewis, who is the manager of the New York City Ballet costume shop, and he is actually joining me today from the costume shop. We have an exciting segment happening today. We already did part one. This is part two of our little special costume shop series that Jarod is joining me with. So welcome, Jarod, to Dance Talk.
Thank you for having me back. I'm excited to talk with you again.
Me too. And I'm so excited. So for those of you listening on audio, Jarod has some exciting costumes we're going to talk about behind him. But for those of you watching on video, you're going to get to see it. So anybody who's listening on audio, you might want to switch over to Spotify or YouTube and catch what he's going to show and show us in the costume shop. So Jarod, I just want to dive in. So just quickly, because if somebody is listening to this first without having listened to part one, just give a real brief background about who you are, what your job is, and how you got here.
So my name is Jarod Lewis. I'm the costume shop manager of the New York City Ballet. Background about myself, I'm originally from a small farming community in Kentucky where I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains. I'm originally an orchestral percussionist, then I became an audio engineer, and then later in life I started learning how to sew, and I was able to combine all those things together to eventually learn tutu making and dance wear. And then through different happenstances and knowing people and having the skill set, I ended up being the costume shop manager here at the ballet. This is the start of my fourth year here, and yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting. So if you listeners, if you want to hear his full story, we go into it in detail in part one. And I met Jarod during the summer. Let's see, it's 2024. So in the summer of 2024, I was invited in by a friend of mine who was there on tour with a group of people. She was working with two other tutu makers, and she invited me in to come in, and I just didn't want to leave. And so Jarod and I, exchanged information, and here we are talking costumes and sewing and New York City Ballet and all kinds of fun stuff. What I wanted to talk about today, a couple different things. But what I wanted to start with, especially because you have those beautiful, exciting costumes, I feel like I want to reach through and touch them, Jarod, is I want to talk about Nutcracker. I want to concentrate a little bit on, New York City Ballet has such a beautiful Nutcracker. In my opinion, my humble opinion, I do believe it's the best Nutcracker I've ever seen. It really is. I think it's a Nutcracker you don't get tired of seeing. It's very magical for children and for adults. It's just something really spectacular. And then when you happen to know a dancer or two or children dancing in it, it makes it, how when you go see somebody perform, it makes it that much more special. And then in the theater there up at Lincoln Center, it's just really, everything comes together so wonderfully. And it's a great, great show to see. So there's my plug, my Nutcracker plug. But I want to talk about when the costume shop is when you hear it's Nutcracker season. First of all, how far in advance to the actual start of Nutcracker? Because Nutcracker begins over Thanksgiving weekend, correct? Or right before Thanksgiving weekend?
Nutcracker opens to the public the day after Thanksgiving.
Right. Okay. So prior to that, how soon are you starting to work on Nutcracker within the costume shop itself?
Each year is a little different. What it is that our wardrobe department, they are communicating with the director of costumes and myself, giving us a list of things that they would like to have made each year. So really, they give us a list a year in advance.
Okay.
And so, yeah. So they get through the end of Nutcracker of last year, 2023, and then they realize, okay, well, based off of casting this year, we were really struggling with this set of costumes, or, this is really the last time this set of costumes can be worn anymore before they just fall apart on stage. Or sometimes it's, we just need another set of stuff. Um, and so this past year, men's wardrobe and women's wardrobe both gave us their ideal list. And then Mark Happel, the director of costumes, and myself, we go through that list and figure out, okay, based off of what we're doing for the fall season, which is before Nutcracker, and then the winter season that starts 2 weeks after Nutcracker ends,
Wow.
what can we fit in that timeline?
Hmm.
Because I believe this is our 70th year of Nutcracker. These
Wow.
costumes are reused every year. It's
Hmm.
not that we have to rebuild Nutcracker every year from the ground up. Typically, because this is such a prominent and reoccurring ballet, the outfits will last anywhere between, let's say, 12 and 15 years.
But
And
that's
so
long. That's a
it is a
long,
long
yeah.
time. If it's 12 years and we will say for easy math, 50 performances a year,
Hmm.
that's 600 performances that costume has to survive
Wow.
before we make it
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. And
And
I'm sorry, I just want to interrupt you for 1 minute and just point out that the fact that the costume can last that long under that rigorous circumstances, because it's not, a dancer's not just sitting there, this is going through sweat. This is
yes,
going through, all kinds of movement and stretching and pulling and changing and all kinds of things. For it to last that long, it speaks to the quality and the making of these costumes. So I just really
yes.
want to stress that. So continue.
And so they give us that list. And so this past year, the main things that were asked of us for Nutcracker was women's wardrobe wanted a whole new set of marzipan,
Mhm.
which we would love to be able to do, but those carousels that go around them, and when I say carousel, it's more like a platter dish full of
Mhm.
different desserts and fruits and vegetables and little
Mhm.
things. All of those have to be handmade. And then
Okay,
the apparatus that holds all of it together
I
has to be
see.
handmade. And then we can actually make the costume with it.
Mhm.
Well, it's a set of six for a full cast, where
Mhm.
it's four core and the wardrobe has two of the principal demi outfits. That way
Mhm.
they can rotate through.
Yep.
Well, we would have to start a year in advance just to, it's not that they're that complicated, it's just with everything else we do in the shop, because we
Mhm.
never just work on one ballet.
Mhm.
It's from right now until Nutcracker opens, there's no time.
Yeah.
So, we're going to push that one off to next year, and we
Mhm.
might start working on those come January or February
Wow.
just to start buying fabric and everything.
Sure.
For this specific year, what we ended up deciding was we are remaking the candy canes, specifically the adults. The children we
Okay.
had remade a few years ago.
Okay.
Here you can see an older version. Um,
Okay.
Depending on
So,
how well the camera picks it up, the
yep.
fabric has yellowed in lots of different areas. The green has faded to almost a lime green color. The
Wow. So
pink has faded.
it wasn't originally lime.
No.
Wow, look at that. So those of you again who perhaps are just listening on audio, wow, the lime, it's such a different color that
Hmm.
it's faded to. It's still pretty. It's very, very
Yes.
pretty. But wow, I never would have thought that it was such a difference in color there. Wow.
These have survived probably longer than 15 years.
Oh,
Um, the one I'm holding is Daniel Ulbricht's, and this
okay.
was his from since he's been dancing.
Okay. Oh, wow.
And so it survived for that long.
Hmm.
Even the bells, you can see,
Yep,
if I can
yep,
get it,
the
you can
bells.
see how tarnished and rusted they are.
Oh, but just I love the history behind that. Like it's for me when I'm looking at these costumes and talking to you and you know just looking over fabrics and whatnot, just the history behind it. The history of fabric and textiles, all that goes into it fascinates me. So I just love that. So Jared just went to grab something, everybody. I'm not
Yes.
sure what, a surprise. A surprise he's grabbing from the costume shop. I
Let's
don't know,
see
but
here. I'll grab. I've got the pink sugar plum
Okay.
and the dewdrop because we'll talk about those as well.
Yep.
So what I'm grabbing, these are what's called the costume Bibles.
Oh yeah, the Bible.
So this is how we can tell that in the past what the colors of the fabric originally were or are supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And through sweat, wear and tear, fading from
Right.
light, all these different things will cause the colors to change. So, here in my hand, I have the pink sugar plum
Oh,
Bible.
fun. Mm-hmm.
And what we're able to do is go through and see all the information about what goes into it.
Wow.
And it's
Wow.
not the patterns, but it's the Bibles are more of an anthology of
Mm-hmm.
the information. And so we're able to see where fabric was bought, how much was bought, what it was for,
Mm-hmm.
from the bodices, bodice trims, skirt layers,
Wow.
which layers it's for, where we got the crystals,
Mm-hmm.
everything. And anytime something is either bought new, updated for whatever reason, or edited,
Mm-hmm.
a new page is put in. And so back when we restocked a lot of the inventory for Pink Sugar Plum, this was for the Nutcracker of 2022.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So this page is almost 2 years old now. And as we go further and further back, here's 2018,
Mm-hmm.
2015, photos from whenever we make the outfits. We have Nutcracker from '08,
Wow.
'87. I believe '87 is the oldest information in here. Yeah.
Okay.
So here we can see that in 1987, that
Mm-hmm.
is the exact color of the fabric that the pink sugar plum
Wow.
was. And so over the years, we know this is what it's supposed to
Mhm.
be.
And are you storing that? Is that archival quality what you're keeping it in, or is it just because it's out of the light and kept in the costume Bible like that's not fading, like the little swatches of fabric and ribbons and things?
Uh, what you just described is the answer. We
Okay.
can't put it in true archival quality because we
Hmm.
have to actively be able to
Oh,
pull these
okay.
in
That
and
makes
out.
sense. Sure, sure.
Um, but by keeping it compressed in these binders,
Hmm.
while it still has a little bit of air being able
Hmm.
to get into, it's not causing the fabric to oxidize.
Right.
And so we also keep it in a closed area outside of the light. And so it's really only brought out when used for examples like this or when we're actively using it in the shop.
Hmm.
And once it's done, it's put back in that storage area.
Okay. Wow. That I just find that so fascinating. And what goes into really archiving and keeping those really great notes of each and every costume that goes in and out of that costume shop that appears on stage for every single solitary ballet. What's the oldest costume, Nutcracker costume that New York City Ballet? Two things. I don't know if you know this is still using. So I
Mhm.
just mean you might not have that information because I'm randomly asking this question. So is it, like what's the oldest costume that's still on stage that they're still using that hasn't been remade? And what's the oldest Nutcracker specifically? What's the oldest Nutcracker costume that New York City Ballet still has, whether it's archived or not, that they still have, they may not use it, but it's still like kept.
So it's a set of two outfits that answers both questions.
Okay.
In the tea scene,
Hmm.
where there's one guy and two women,
Hmm.
the man is in a red Chinese style suit
Hmm.
with a shirt with black pants. The women are in tunics
Hmm.
and they're embroidered with a tea scene that goes around it.
Okay.
Those are
Did
the
not know
originals from
that.
those are the originals from 70 years ago, and they're still used
Wow.
today.
Wow. That you wait, we have to stop on that for a minute. First of all, there's a tea scene embroidered, so you can't see that from the audience.
Correct. It
So
just looks like detail
yes,
on
but
the
that's so
tunic.
beautiful. And how, like, that's just really cool. I think that's so cool. The detail. I'm just, I point these things out. First of all, I get so excited about them. But, the listeners, I want the listeners to really know the details that go into this. It's fascinating. So the tea scenes around these costumes, right?
Hmm
And what was the other
It
thing
ha-
you said? It's the oldest,
well,
70
they're
years.
they're 70 years old, and they are sort of, if the listeners know this reference, they are our ship of Theseus.
Oh, I don't
And
even know that. What does that mean?
what it is that I can't remember if this was in one of Plato's stories,
Hmm.
but in one of the Greek stories, there is a ship called Theseus,
Oh.
and throughout the journey, they have to constantly repair it. And
Hmm.
what it is that at the beginning of the journey, it is the original ship of Theseus.
Hmm.
By the end of the
Oh,
journey, every piece of wood has been replaced on it. And so while it is still the ship of Theseus, is it truly the ship of Theseus? Because it's no longer any original parts are there.
that's
And
very
so
profound. I love that.
and
Continue.
so with these two tunics, the original structure that is going around is the original. We actually
Hmm.
have the fabric from when it was first purchased 70 years ago, and it is metal fabric. It's a woven metal fabric that looks like netting, almost like a
Oh.
wide fish net.
Hmm. Hmm.
But when you try to move it, it's really rigid. Well, after
Wow.
70 years of wear and tear, it's become very soft and malleable to where it almost feels like cotton, but it's still
Wow.
metal. And
Wow.
so you have to think 70 years of salt,
Yes.
oils,
Yes.
cleaning, it'll
Yes.
do that to metal. And all the beading on it, there are probably some beads that are still the original from 70 years ago. And some of the appliques, because it's on both, it's a few people that are set around a tea garden with
Hmm.
trees and dragonflies and all these things. It's all embroidered onto this.
Wow.
And some of it has been fully taken off and completely removed because the fabric wore down, it degraded. If you even lightly pulled on it, it just shredded. So we had to fully replace those sections. But the entity of it itself is still the tunics and the actual embroidered appliques. Those are truly original. And what we do is that each year there's only about one or two people in the shop who will go through and meticulously rebead sections of it or repair things. We're even at the point now to where to increase the longevity of it, we're taking tulle and either dyeing it to perfectly match, or if we have it in stock that matches,
Okay.
we're taking 1 to 2 layers of it. That way it doesn't
Sure.
change what you're seeing, or if any of the
Hmm.
flashes of light, that little bit of tulle won't diminish the refraction of
Wow.
light.
That is
And
amazing. Continue.
and
I'm
that
just.
way the tulle as it goes around, it will still be the exact color. And so
Mhm.
even if you see it from 5 feet away, it doesn't take away from the design of it.
Wow. My mind is going a mile a minute with this because, again, I find this just so interesting and fascinating. And when you talk about the beadwork too, my grandmother, I think I might have shared this with you either on camera, off camera, I don't know, that my grandmother did beadwork for wedding gowns.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so I know the intricacy of that and doing that. And she was very particular, like, the front had to look like the back and the back had to look like the front, the whole thing. But, when you're talking about these costumes, my question, what's going on in my mind is I would love to have been a fly on the wall 70 years ago. Do you
Hmm.
know who was the purchaser of that first fabric for that costume? You know what I mean? Like, who
Who
was,
was in the room? Who was
yes.
doing this?
Oh my
Whose hand?
gosh.
We think
Yeah.
about that in here all the
That's
time.
because it's history. Yeah.
It, it's so the unfortunate reality is be, the designers are typically the only ones who are documented.
Okay.
And it also leads to an issue where people hold the designers up to such a pedestal
Hmm.
that they
Hmm.
believe they're the ones who've done every detail of it, when
Hmm.
really there's entire teams of people.
Yeah.
I have a staff of 16 people in here that come from 8 to 9 different countries
Yeah.
of ages from in their 20s up until in their 70s.
Yeah.
And it's more than just Karinska. Like, yes, Karinska thought this up,
Uh-huh.
but it's her team that sat there and
Yes.
actually executed it. And it
Yes.
hurts me so much that I know that my team right now, if we don't start documenting them and their
Yes.
artistry and who they are, they're going to be lost to time, just like Karinska's team was. And then
Yeah.
all they'll remember is just Karinska
Yeah. It's
still
too
for
amazing.
70 more years.
Yeah. And I hope you do that. Like, I hope you do make those documentations because it is important because, there is a team of people behind the person who's in front and you are there to support them. I'm talking about everything, whether
Yes.
it's the head of a company, whether it's a choreographer, whether it's an artistic director, whether it's the executive, that person out there in the front is taking most of the initial heat, if there's heat,
Yeah.
and then it
The
gets
good
filtered,
and the
and the
bad.
bad, yes, and it gets filtered down, and it supports constantly. But I do, as a dancer, as a former artistic director, as a studio owner, as a arts advocate, as an audience member, I really support that documentation, because I think it's so fascinating, especially, you have an organization like New York City Ballet, and the history behind it
Yes.
in the ballet world, not just the ballet world too, but the dance world. I think that's the footprints that it leaves, right? So I would love to see that. I'm two thumbs up
I
for that, Jarod.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
one of my long-term life goals
good.
is start having more people acknowledge the makers of the
Yeah.
art world, not just the designer.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the designers will appreciate it too.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a team
Some
effort.
won't,
Yeah. Well,
because they
uh,
want all the credit.
yeah, some won't, but I hope the bulk will. And
I
just,
believe the majority will.
yeah, yeah, because it does take a team, and it's a lot of hard work. And yeah, a thank you goes a long way. I did an interview. Oh gosh, his name is popping out of my head right now. He's a Gene Schiavone. He's a
Mm,
he does a lot of dance photography. He did ABT's photography for a long time.
yes.
But he was on my podcast. He's coming out with a book, by the way, a photography book. But he said something that was so moving. He's such a humble man, and he said something. I'm going to misquote it, but the gist of it was, he had found, when he was cleaning out his stuff, he found, and getting stuff ready for his book, he found a box of thank you notes from dancers, and he said his life was summed up in a
In that
box of
box.
thank you notes. Thank
Yeah.
you notes. And I was so moved. And he talked about how moving it was, these little notes he would get from the dancers, or someone he photographed. And so, yeah, so that goes a long way. That goes a really long way. Oh, I love it. I love it, Jarod. So, what else do we have on that rack behind you?
So specifically for Nutcracker,
Hmm?
I've shown you candy canes.
Yep. And jiggle them loud so we can all hear them. Jiggle those bells. Oh, it's exciting.
And so I also have one. Women's Wardrobe has asked for another principal female hot chocolate. And so we're going
Okay.
to make a duplicate of
A
this as
duplicate.
accurate as possible
Wow.
because
And that, go ahead. Sorry. I didn't mean
it
to
is
interrupt you.
very heavily detailed.
I was just going to say
Um,
that the detail and intricacy in this costume, again, for those of you listening on audio, it's worth, switching over to see this on video, to see the costumes. Yeah, go about, it's like rich chocolate. I feel like I want to have some.
and that's the thing, it should look like it's hot chocolate.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
while it is the Spanish part of
Hmm.
Nutcracker, the theme is hot chocolate, and all the details that go into these outfits,
Hmm.
from if I can get it up here,
It's
the
velvet, right?
buttons
Is it?
are all
Oh,
have, can you see that?
I can. Oh, look at
To
that.
the details going around.
It looks like the buttons. So are the buttons hard, or are they soft?
They're soft.
They look like little pin cushions.
They're supposed
Wow.
to be marshmallows.
Oh, see, pin cushions. Yep, that's what. Oh, wow.
And even the chocolate bonbons, each
Oh
one
my
of these are
gosh.
handmade.
Wow. Now, are the dancers aware of what these symbolize?
Uh, yes and no for the
Yes,
most
yeah.
part.
Because I just think
One
that's so cool.
one of the things that Karinska did in homage to Balanchine,
Mhm.
in a way that this is a detail that only the dancers will ever see in the costume shop. So on the
Yeah.
bodice of the outfit, do you see this
I
medallion
was
right
just gonna
here?
say, yes, I do. A
This
locket,
is
right?
this is not a medallion. This is a photo of
Balance. Yeah.
Balanchine.
Yes, I saw that right away. Oh my gosh. That, look at that. That is really amazing. And wow. And we don't see
And
that from the stage.
a detail that just helps. So of the principals, men and women, they're
Hmm.
orange.
Okay.
And then the orange is the detail of the lame fabric going around everywhere.
Okay.
The core members are red, pink, blue, and purple. And so with
Okay.
orange, you have 5 different colors.
Yeah.
On the women's skirts, part of the design is also that of almost a can skirt, because then underneath,
Yes, I wondered that when I saw. Okay, look at that. So Jared's lifting up this skirt, and you see it looks like it's not all variegated colors, but it's like the can skirt underneath.
mhm.
Wow. That's beautiful. I'm touching it through the screen.
Then 2 other outfits I have here from Nutcracker. We have a pink sugar plum in process.
Oh, okay. So this is a new one. This is a new
So,
one you're making?
yes. So, whenever we start making outfits that are tutus, the first fitting is always just the trunk with the basque or the
Oh,
yoke. The technical
okay.
term is basque.
Ask. Oh, okay.
Um, and then the bodice. And so
Got
we'll
it.
go through, fit everything. All the inside of it is still raw
Yep, yep.
edges, because we're not going to do a full finish until
Hmm.
it's ready.
Okay.
So this one it's gone through the first fitting. We have all the pins in place
Hmm.
where it will need to be corrected and re-sewn together.
Such a
And
pretty
then
color. It's such a pretty,
it is.
really like a real light pink. It's very pretty.
And then here is one that is near finished. It's
Oh,
already gone through the first fitting. It's now
mhm.
onto the second fitting. And let me
Wow. Oh,
see
look
if
at
this
is
one.
is the tutu like sparkly?
So every pink sugar plum,
Mhm.
there is a detailed map, we'll call it, a
Mhm.
blueprint, where there are specific clusters of
Yeah, you see
rhinestones
that.
on here. On
Pretty.
every single pink sugar plum, no matter the size,
Mhm.
these will be in the exact
Exact
same
same
spots.
place. See?
And then it's the little clustering that will eventually be put on here, just the sparkling all around.
Yes.
That's different on every one. We
Yeah,
can't
it's all
get that.
sugar. Yeah.
And what's very unique about the pink sugar plum is this is the only tutu that we actually rhinestone the top and the underside of it,
Oh, the same piece of fabric, front and back, almost like is what
so
you're
that
saying.
you have the
Hmm.
top,
Yep, yep.
and then on the back side of it, it is also.
Wow.
The reason why is because when this specific outfit spins and
Hmm.
turns,
Hmm.
what happened before Mark Happel got here is that whenever it would spin, you would see the flash, and then you'd see a
Mm.
gray spot on the back. And
Oh.
so we even have specific sizes of what goes on the front versus the back, because those have been selected for specific reasons. And so that way, no matter which direction the sugar plum is facing and
Hmm.
spinning, you always see the flashes of light and you don't see gray spots.
Wow. I have to point out again, this attention to detail just elevates not only the costume, but it's all to elevate the experience for the audience.
Hmm.
It just makes a better, your eye doesn't break. It just makes a whole, oh my goodness, I'm not going to look at the Nutcracker the same again. I'll be looking for all these little details, you know?
Our our job as costume makers is, well, like, there's many things.
Hmm.
One, making sure the dancers feel at the utmost comfortable in their outfit
Hmm.
and confident, so that they're not worried about what they're
Sure.
wearing. But it's also knowing how to put intricate details on an outfit that then only accentuate what is happening on stage and not taking away. It has
Yeah.
to be a part of the
Yeah.
atmosphere and the environment. It's not supposed to be the forefront.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I mean, that's just amazing. Now, those two sugar plum costumes, are those, and you don't have to give me names, are those for specific sugar plum fairies, or
For
is it
this year.
for this year? Like they know who those are for and that's tailored to them, or is it sugar plum fairy and they'll be adjusted to who's going to be sugar plum?
The sugar plums are,
You don't have to
so
say names because I don't want to get it.
yeah,
Yeah.
what is now in stock over at the theater in the
Hmm.
wardrobe area. There are probably around 25 to 30 green and pink sugar plums.
Oh, wow.
Uh,
Okay.
that way, what it is that whenever you enter this role, once you hit your really like third year of doing it,
Mm-hmm.
depending on your anatomy,
Yeah.
once again, to make sure you're at your most comfort, if you don't perfectly fit into one of these outfits, because they're also, just like every outfit we make,
Yeah.
they're so intricately made for each specific dancer,
Mhm.
we will then, basically, it has become your rite of passage to get
Yeah.
your own now. And
Oh,
so this
wow.
year, two dancers are getting their own green and pink sugar plum. You
Oh,
don't
how
just get one, you get a green and a pink.
that's exciting. And what an honor, right? That must feel like so exciting for the dancer to be like, I got
Yes.
now, now I have the both costumes. Wow.
It's they're no longer just doing the role. They
Yeah.
they are the role, because
Yeah.
this is your green sugar plum, this is
Wow.
your pink sugar plum.
Wow. And then so say one of those sugar plums retires at some point down the
Hmm.
road. Do then those costumes get used for the other sugar plums until sugar plum gets their own sugar plums again? Is that how the
Essentially, yeah.
kind of wow.
Yeah.
That's
And it's, if it's depending, it also depends on the how old that one is,
mhm.
because we have some dancers where they might be doing sugar plum for 15 years now, and their sugar plum is just deflated so
Right,
much that
yeah.
there is no structure.
Yeah.
So with how intricate these tutus are,
Mhm.
especially the green sugar plum, it's not as simple as just retacking it to give it life. It
Mhm.
has to be completely remade from the ground
Yeah.
up.
Oh, wow.
And then it's also, it could be something as simple as, let's say you've had children and
Mhm.
your body
Mhm.
goes through the hormonal changes. You
Sure.
can do everything that you are supposed to be doing, but from when, let's say, you started green sugar plum at 22
Mhm.
and now you're 37,
Mhm.
your body has shifted. Every
Changes.
person
Yes.
over 15 years is going to
Yes.
change.
Yeah.
And so we don't want that to be a stressor of the dancer to
Mhm.
have to take in that type of, I have to fit this body shape my entire life. It's
Yeah.
like, no, if your body changes, we change the outfit to fit you
Oh, see,
so that
that's
you
good.
don't think about it. That's our priority.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess I would imagine too if
Responsibility.
yeah, if a dancer is pregnant and still dancing up to a certain point, right? I would
Hmm.
imagine the costume just gets made. Perhaps is it
It
able? I guess my question is it able to be like altered and let out or fixed, however it needs to be fixed until the dancer is not going to dance while they're pregnant anymore? How does that work?
correct.
Yeah, like
Uh,
that, just like that.
it's we're able to make things alterable up to a certain amount. Um, some outfits, pregnant with pregnancies, it's always situational with each
Sure.
person,
Yeah.
because every person their body will change
Mm-hmm.
differently.
Yeah.
Some people don't really show as much, some
Mm-hmm.
people show more.
More.
And
Yeah.
so we do what we have to do to make sure that you're at your
Yeah.
most comfort. And then also so that the structure of the costume hasn't been degraded or destroyed
Yeah.
as well
Yeah.
for our artistry. That's
Yeah.
that's our little bit of selfishness
I
with it.
well, but but it's important. It really is important. I want to talk about the bodice just for a minute. Just
Hmm.
I was thinking of this earlier, and I know in the other podcast, the other part one, and also when I was there, you spoke about laying out the fabric in particular ways for the stretch to go a certain way. But some of those bodices look so structured and are they, or is there always a little give somewhere at
Uh,
some point somewhere in that bodice?
so it depends on it depends on the, what would be the right word?
Piece
It
maybe, or
it
the
it depends on the reasoning for the stretch.
okay.
Not so, I'll turn my iPad
Yeah, yeah.
around. So I have the green sugar plum here with me.
Yep. So I'm just going to pause for a minute. So everybody, we're inside the costume shop of New York City Ballet. This is so exciting, and this
Let
is a
me.
beautiful costume that I actually saw in person. But go ahead, Jarod.
I'm looking for a box to put it on
Oh,
so
okay.
I can raise the iPad a
Yep,
little
yep.
higher.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
That way it's getting a better angle.
Yep, yep. Yeah, it's
Okay.
great.
Can you see?
Yeah, it's out of the camera a little bit, but maybe I'm not sure. Yep, there we go. There we go. That's good.
There we go. Okay.
Perfect.
So here we have the green sugar plum.
Mm-hmm.
This one was actually only ever worn once.
Wow.
This was made for Sterling Hilton for her final bow, which happened to be during Nutcracker. And so we, as a shop, made this for her final performance. So she was at, her most pristine.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's
And so this
beautiful.
has only been worn one time on stage.
Wow.
To answer your question about the stretch of
Yep,
it,
yep.
every outfit, like I said, is made for that particular dancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever we are making these bodices, there's no real need for stretch inside of it because it's made to fit
Got
you.
it. Okay. Mm-hmm.
The other part is the inside of these outfits.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever we're constructing them,
Mm-hmm.
they have to be just as beautiful on the inside as the
Yeah.
outside.
Yep.
And so on each of the seams, specifically with sugar plum, not everyone is going to be this way. There's a thing called spiral steel boning going inside each of these channels.
Uh-huh.
And what that does, it allows it, as those
Oh,
who
look
we
at
can
that.
roll this up
Ah,
and then it bounces back.
I would be like, don't do that to the costume.
And so
Wow.
the costume itself has its own structure. That way,
Oh,
it's almost like a statue on top of the dancer, and it
yeah.
can bend and move. It's a lot more
I
flexible
see that.
than people think it
Yeah,
is.
totally. I never would have. Wow, I would have been like afraid to roll that down like that. I would have thought I would have ruined it. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And then even the skirt of this, has its own structure to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just going to stay there and float in the air.
So pretty. It's so I love how it's like it looked like it's a little gathered or however it's sewn together. Because I from here and I'm trying to remember it in person, but how it's like it almost looks like little tulips, but it's not. I don't know what you would call it on the tutu.
It's I This tutu
Uh-huh.
is probably the most labor intensive one we make
Mm-hmm.
of our reoccurring tutus.
Mm-hmm.
From beginning to end, from cutting out the fabric to going through the fittings and everything, it's anywhere between 150 to 200 hours to make this one tutu.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
amazing. See, that's what
because
wow.
all the detail that's around the edge of these,
Mm-hmm.
that is a gold lame cording that has to be turned over the fabric a roughly an eighth to a 16th of an inch, and then that is zigzagged across, and it's done on the green fabric and
Oh,
the pink fabric. Then that's
wow.
sewn together on a horsehair braid. That's then
Wow.
pleated together. That's then attached to the top plate here, which the top plate is the detail version of a classical tutu.
Yeah.
All the buttons are made, all the crystals have to be hand placed. So even the detail up here on the center
Mm-hmm.
front, all this is made in the shop.
Oh, it's
It
beautiful.
starts out as just rolls of fabric, and then we either dye it or some of it can be bought as is. But it's a very detailed garment to
It
take from
really
beginning to end.
It really is. And who designed that? Or is that the same the
Korinska.
current wow. Yeah. So that
Yeah,
was that's the 70-year-old design, but not the 70-year-old costume.
correct. I
Wow.
do believe that the sugar plum did change at one point.
Hmm. Oh,
Um, this is Korinska's design,
hmm.
but at some point, from her true original design, she
Hmm.
changed it to this.
Okay, yeah, that is so beautiful. And for everybody listening too, in person, that costume was just stunning as well. The detail, we can see some of it on camera, but in person, just and up close like that, the detail that goes into it is just, it's just
Yeah, the
amazing.
camera does not give it
It
justice.
doesn't, and it also it's like it is like couture. It really is.
Mhm.
That it that all those costumes and what goes into them. What else do you have there behind? Do you have any other Nutcracker stuff for us back there?
This is it for Nutcracker. What else I have behind me right now that we're finishing because the fall season
Mm-hmm.
opens Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yes,
and so
exciting.
it's currently Sunday, so in
I know.
48 hours,
Oh my gosh.
here we go.
Yeah.
But right now, everything for week one of the fall season is good and ready to go.
Oh, good.
For week 2 and 3 that we're now working on, we have Copalia.
Mm-hmm.
These are the pants, the purple fabric behind me.
Okay.
Uh, these are the pants for the core members who are the groomsmen.
Mm-hmm.
So here I have an original set, or they're not true originals, but they're
Uh-huh.
from the last rebuild
I
from, I
see. Okay.
believe, maybe 14 years ago or
Mm-hmm.
something.
That's a lot of
And
fabric too. I didn't realize they were that balloony, for lack of a better word.
yes,
Wow.
and
Hmm.
they smell atrocious. Um, they're awful. It's there's so much dirt that has built up on this because this is actually silk.
Oh,
And so
wow.
it's a woven silk. It
Hmm.
almost looks like
You
hemp
look, yeah,
because of
I was
how
gonna
wide it
say,
is.
yeah. I would have not known
But
that was silk.
because we primarily work with natural fibers,
Hmm.
we try our best not to use polyesters
Okay, yeah.
because it doesn't breathe,
Right,
and
right.
so the dancers are going to sweat more.
Yeah,
It's not pretty.
yeah.
But what has happened is that here, this is the
Oh,
original applique that's been transferred from garment to garment over the years,
oh,
because this is
okay.
our 50th year of Capalia.
50 years. Wow. Oh,
And so this applique, each time the pants are rebuilt, it's pulled off. They are meticulously cleaned, they are repaired, and then they are hand sewn back on place so that then they can be remade
and I
into
can't,
the
I'm sorry.
pants.
And I can't tell that applique, is that applique lace or is it crocheted?
It is a crocheted lace.
Okay, couldn't tell from here. Yeah, because I love
Uh,
that as well. Like I love, my grandmother did that too. Like she would be able to, she would could have worked in your costume shop. My grandmother. Wow, look
so
at
here you
that.
can
That's
see.
beautiful. And where does that come from? That must come from, or originally, where did it come from? I imagine it came from not here. I shouldn't
I,
say that. I'm just imagining that.
So this, whenever I'm looking at it, I can
Hmm.
tell that this is
Sorry.
partially machine constructed. So more than
Oh,
likely, this actually probably came from a
uh,
larger piece of fabric that
okay.
had these, what would be the right word? These motifs on them.
Uh-huh.
And then this was removed from that
I
fabric and then
see.
used as an applique. In
Okay.
costuming, it's actually very common to find fabric that has small details on it that you want. You just cut that
Oh,
off, finish all the edges so it doesn't
I
fray,
see.
and then that's used as an applique.
Okay, had my bubble burst. That's okay.
It's very time consuming
It is.
to
I
have
don't know
something
what I
like
was
this
thinking.
handmade,
Yeah, I don't know what I
and
was thinking.
because then you have to pay the person. It's
Yes.
very cost
Yeah.
effect inefficient, and so by doing it this way, this is
It's
the best
beautiful. I mean,
way.
it's just so
Yeah,
beautiful. Wow, that's
and
exciting.
because we're also dealing for us in costuming when it's design, we're not thinking of it from 5 feet away, walking down a
Hmm.
catwalk.
Hmm.
We have to think of it being 60 feet away under
Yeah.
heavy stage light
Yes.
and the speed of a galloping horse while
Yes. Yeah.
spinning.
Yeah.
If you can't see that detail,
Yeah.
it's not as important. So for these pants, it is the shape of it, it is the density of it that's the most important. So if actually we needed to have, let's say this degraded to a point that we had to replace it, this could easily be replicated today with sending this off to a manufacturer and they can make
Oh,
us a
okay.
hundred of
That
them.
that makes sense. And I just want to point out something for anybody who hasn't listened to part one of this costume series. Listen to it because Jarod goes into detail about the lighting and the lighting effects on costuming and whatnot, and how decisions are made because of light, and
Mhm.
how you replicate right inside there. The lights at somewhere in there. I'm not exactly sure where they replicate the lights on stage. Did I remember that
Yes.
correctly? Yeah. So.
In the fitting room,
Mhm.
we're able to turn off all these overhead lights, which all of these are picked for a very specific reason, the
Mhm.
color, temperature, and everything. We can turn these off and we have at a lower lumen. So, for those who don't know what lumen is,
Mhm.
it's the amount of light that's actually produced by a light
Mhm.
source. So, for us, light bulbs. Um, and it's the exact same lights used at the theater, just a lower lumen. That way we can see what color the fabrics and everything look
Right,
under the
under a
stage
stage light,
lights.
which is, I just think, genius. It's just, you know, yeah, it's like it's worth a show of the costume behind the scenes
Yes.
as it is on stage, what you're watching on stage, because it's just so fascinating. It's just really, I'm just enamored by it all. What else he got back there on that rack?
So we have a couple more things for this season. We have Concerto DSCH,
Oh, see, and
which was
then we go the
designed.
opposite. Then we go more simple and color related. But go ahead. I won't talk for you.
So th this was designed by Holly Hines, who was the previous director of costumes before Mark Happel.
Hmm.
And what is interesting about the rebuild for these outfits, while we have the costume Bibles that
Hmm.
shows us the exact color of what these are supposed to be, these are the original ones.
Okay.
And the rebuilds are over on the side to my
Hmm.
left.
Hmm.
Um, is that we actually can't make it exactly what's in the costume Bible
Oh,
this time.
okay.
The reason why is because we're only remaking the demi women and the demi women, the women's core and demis.
Hmm.
Um, but they have to match exactly to the men's colors.
Oh,
Well, the
okay.
men's are just as old as the women's, so they faded in color. You know, here these were originally the exact same color, but here you can see
Oh,
that
so
the
it's
double
lighter.
Georgette has become more peach over time
Hmm.
versus the original orange. So what we have to do, we're actually matching the colors to the men's outfits.
Oh, okay.
We'll document that in the Bible
Hmm.
that it is purposely being chosen to not be the correct color for this
Hmm.
reason. And then when we have time to rebuild the men's, we'll rebuild the women's again.
Yeah.
That way they are identical.
Wow.
So in short, when we're making new costumes for things like this, we
Hmm.
actually then have to distress them to a certain degree so that they look older, even though they're
Wow.
brand
Yep.
new.
Yep. To match. Wow. That's amazing.
Then we have
Never a dull
this,
moment in there, Jarod.
it's never. Um, then we have the spring principle
Oh,
for
that's pretty.
4 seasons for the
Hmm.
spring section. Um, so this is all hand painted to have this ombre from the green down to the pale yellow, and the
Hand
inside
painted.
of it, yeah.
Mm.
And so
In
our
that painting room.
mhm.
There's a painting room, everybody, at the costume shop.
And then we have signs. This is a Gianna Reisen ballet. This was
Oh,
originally premiered with SAB during one of their summer workshops,
okay.
and now it's been being remounted for
Hmm.
New York City Ballet. So we
Okay.
have to remake all the costumes
I
because
see.
these are too
Sure, sure.
small,
Yep, yep.
and now they'll be made for adults.
Adults, and that's just a pretty color. I think it looks
Yeah,
such like a pretty, like a slate blue almost, or something like that.
it's very close to that, and it has a type of mill skin that we use for most of our bases, and then a mesh fabric as well.
Oh, okay.
So it's up close, you can see that there's that mesh.
Oh, I see. And is there no tutu or skirt with that, or is there?
Nope.
No, just
So
that.
this one will just have the skin tone tights
Just the
with
skin
it.
tone tights. Yep, yep. Wow. That's
So
every.
this is the
Yeah.
remaining of what we're working on of rebuilds for this season.
Okay.
Then we have the new ballet, which premieres October 9th. I'm not showing any
Nope,
of that
we can't show
because
that. Nope, not allowed.
in, until it's on stage, we do not show anything because at any
Yeah.
moment, things can change.
Yeah, even when you're in there on tour, you can't see it. So I'm
Yeah.
vouching for Jarod. It's all you can't you can't see it, which is fine. I get it. It should be that way. That's how it should be.
Yeah.
Anything you want before I go into some like terms and questions and stuff? Is there anything you want to talk or say about Nutcracker, or what the audience could look for differently, or anything? I don't know.
I mean, keep an eye out for the tea scene and just be
Oh
aware of the
yes.
tea tunics and just how detailed they are, but also the history that's there. The fact that they have survived the history of this company.
Hmm.
Um, the sugar plums, while they're all, it's our goal is that when your grandparents saw Nutcracker for the first time,
Hmm.
and then when your grandchildren in the future see Nutcracker for the
Hmm.
first time, you should be under the impression that these are the same costumes that have survived for history,
Yeah.
not having no idea that there could be 50 of this exact same one of just varying sizes and heights,
Hmm.
but made in such detail that they look identical.
Yeah, I like that too, because so often you'll find families will bring, their generational. to see the
Yes.
Nutcracker as part of their Christmas season or holiday season, because they loved it as a child, or their grandma brought
Hmm.
them, or grandpa brought them, and then they want, and so you want to hear, oh, it's like when I was a little girl, or a little
Yeah.
boy, and not that, oh my gosh, it's a little different. It was different when I was little, so I like that you had the same experience.
Yeah.
That's
It's
great.
it's important to us.
Yes, yes. Well, I mean, I think we get that too. I think that's why the audience comes back over and over again, right? It's such a celebration. Um, I want to talk about, if we can, Jarod, some
Hmm.
terminology and tools, I'm going to call it.
Okay.
So, what is in your bag? What do you carry? What do you carry as a costume shop manager and as seamstress yourself? What's in your bag that you need? What are the tools you need to do your job?
Definitely. So we'll actually walk over to my station. And
Okay.
I'll give a quick little tour of the shop as well,
Okay.
because you got to see it. Everyone
Yes.
else should as well.
Yes. Yes.
So I'll start in the back area and move our way forward. So
Okay.
you mentioned the painting room, which
Hmm.
is actually our dye room.
Oh,
And what
the
it is
dining room.
that in here, this is where all things are dyed and painted, actually. So
Hmm.
we have our spray booth where our dyer paints and sprays everything. She cleans out the space so she can use it. But she has natural light for when she needs it, different machines for washing and drying. But then the most unique thing is up here on this wall. What it is that on all four of these shelves, those are the exact same color dyes, but whenever you get up close, you can see that some of these are used for silken wool because that's a cellulose-based
Hmm.
textile. Then you have sorry, let me rephrase that. You have cotton rayon, which
Hmm.
is cellulose-based.
Okay.
Then you have silken wool, which is protein. It's an animal byproduct. Then you have acetate nylon. And then you have the RIT dye, which we try very hard not to use. We
Hmm.
do not like it. But it's dealing with acetate and polyamides
Hmm.
and then polyesters.
Hmm.
So depending on what textiles our dyer is working with, she knows how to use those and also how to change. She uses a 60-gallon dye vat, which is actually just a giant cooking pot. Um, and she can change all um, the salt content, the citric acid. She has to be aware of the pH balance. If it's raining outside, it changes the barometric pressure in the room. All these things are details of what our dyer has to go through to think about things.
Wow.
Then from the top down in the shop, we have our director of costumes.
Mhm.
He oversees the shop, well, myself, the shop, and the four other areas of the costume department. Then there's myself who manages the shop. Then we have our men's draper and women's draper. The drapers are the people who are actually the pattern makers of the
Mhm.
shop. So we have our women's draper who sits on this side, looks in, and then all the way on that side, we have our men's draper. And he's looking in as well to
Okay.
the director of costumes and myself.
Okay.
Next to the men's draper on the table, can you
Uh-huh.
see?
Yep.
Kinda. There is our fabric cutter,
Yep.
our fabric dyer.
Mhm.
Then we have our assistant draper,
Mhm.
our shopper. She has
Mhm.
her own station over there.
Yeah, the shopper
Um,
has quite a station. That's a job. Wow. That is a
yes.
crazy job.
And then we have 10 stitchers in the room. And so for those people that to know, a stitcher in the theatrical world is the terminology of the title of the person who actually sews things together.
Mhm.
Different industries have different titles because that word is actually determining what their skill set is. So for us in theater, a stitcher, they're able to stitch every type of thing together.
Okay.
We don't call them seamstresses because they're not just sewing seams together like
Oh,
what
okay.
bridal would be.
I see. Okay.
Mhm.
Good to know that
And
difference.
so a term that's popping up more and more in today's world is a costume technician,
Oh.
because we have costume designers and
Mhm.
we have costume technicians,
Oh.
and they're the people who actually, I would
Mhm.
refer to myself as a costume technician
Mhm.
because I do more than just sew. I know how to
Okay.
dye, I know how to paint, I know how to make 15-foot tall puppets that are worn on an aperture, and
Wow.
I've made those types of mother gingers.
Yep. Oh, looks like we're
But
getting
in
ready to work.
So I have my computer behind me when I'm doing desk work,
Oh.
but what would be in my bag are
Scissors.
all, and not just one pair.
Whoa. Shears. Yeah. Wow. Wow. Yeah. Whoa. I know. Wow. That's not that router. I'm gonna
So
I'm gonna see what I know.
these are all just my different cutting tools.
Whoa. Wow.
So we have anything from
Those
tailoring shears
those are sharp.
to
Pinking shears.
different types of pinking shears. A pinking shear has a large serrated blade
Yep.
because on natural fibers, if you cut it with this and you don't have a machine that can
Mm.
bind off the edge, this is a great way of just cutting through.
So
It
it
leaves
doesn't
it nice
fall.
and, yeah.
Wow. And when I was little and I used to take my grandmother's pinking shears and cut paper with it, she
I'm
was
sure she
not,
wanted to kill you.
she did not very happy. I was not to use I was not to use the good scissors. Let's put it that way.
Yes. Then we have rotary blades.
Yep.
These are different handles.
I have one
I
of those.
prefer this style
Hmm.
because it just slides
Yep.
and you roll it and cut. This is a safer version where you have to
Oh,
actually
the
squeeze
blade.
it and then the
Okay.
blade comes down.
Yeah, because that blade is
Um,
sharp. That's a sharp blade.
it is. It is as sharp as a pair of scissors.
Yeah.
I don't like this because you have to squeeze it the whole time
Oh, yeah. Okay.
versus this, you just
Yeah.
remove the safety
Yep.
guard
Yep.
and you can go. Then
Wow.
Then there's the two different brands of scissors that I primarily use.
Mm.
The most common in the United States is Ginger. You
Oh,
can buy
okay.
these from most places, even at Walmart,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a good quality pair of
Mm-hmm.
scissors. My preferred type, these are my smaller ones, and then up to my largest pair. These are Kai.
Okay.
So Kai.
Hi.
It's a
Mm-hmm.
Japanese
I was
brand.
just gonna say it
The
sounded
metal,
Japanese. Yeah.
the metal is very soft,
Mm-hmm.
but it cuts through fabric like butter.
Oh,
They're
okay.
beautiful.
I was just
And
gonna
they
say
have
like, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue what you
oh,
were
I was
saying.
gonna say they have lifetime warranties. Like I am not sponsored by
No, of
Kai,
course we're
but I
not
love them
sponsored or
so
yeah.
much.
But it's like it's like a chef who wants a good set of cutting knives, right? Or
Yes.
if that's what it's like, you have to have your proper tools. Or someone, a hairstylist who has their own, they roll out their scissors or what they. Wow.
And then this is probably my most favorite
Every
company
pair
in
of
the
jewelry.
world for scissors.
Ernest Wright.
Ernest Wright.
Hmm.
These are handcrafted in England.
I was gonna say it looks like English writing.
Yes. I have
Typeset.
only ever
Unique type.
used these once.
Oh,
Um,
how come?
they are because I only use them on very special
Special.
projects.
Okay, special
Yeah.
projects. I get it. Yep, that makes sense. Special project. He's bringing them out.
Yeah. So
Nice.
I've used these once, and after each time I
Put
polish
them
them back, I clean them
put them back in. Do you have to
because they're
oil
just,
them or no? Do you oil
yes.
scissors? Okay.
Yeah. And
Wow.
then, that's for cutting stuff. Then it comes down to things as simple as a ruler. The thing, though, is that a ruler is not simple. You can have things like this, which is divided into quarters, halves,
Wow.
thirds. This one is only 8 inches long and 2 inches wide. I really like the Omni Grip brand because it's also good for quilting.
Okay, good. Again, we're not promoting or sponsored by
Yeah.
anything. It's just his personal
Th-
preferences.
Then we have this type of ruler, which
Oh,
is actually a
let me see one.
flexible,
That's cool.
and so you can move it in all different kinds of shapes and everything, and it's very consistent with either inches or centimeters.
Oh,
And when you're having to do weird shapes or patterns,
it
this is a
bends.
great way to manipulate it around.
Wow, look at that.
Or if you're doing three-dimensional objects, you
Mm-hmm.
can start at one point and then move it around throughout it.
Right. Wow. Does a designer ever come in and they say, "Oh, here's my thoughts. Here's what I'd like to do," and you're thinking, "Oh, I don't know how we're gonna do that." Yes, yes, we can do it. And then you're like, "Oh my gosh,
Oh,
now I gotta figure out how to do it."
we don't worry about that. That comes
Okay.
later. But then I have, all these other rulers that I could
Oh my
spend
gosh.
days talking about all
Look
of
at
them.
that. Look at all these tools.
No, these are just the rulers that I use.
Now, I guess you've collected them over the years for when you need something, correct? I would imagine.
Yes.
I mean, that's amazing. Look at all that. Now,
So,
huh,
like these are specifically made for tailoring, for pants. Um, this is a type of French ruler. It's very clear, so it's hard to
look at
see,
those
but
French.
it
Very
has
fancy.
uh, custom made arm's eye rulers. The arm's eye
Oh,
is the part of the body that goes around the shoulder.
okay. Look at that.
And then I even have very special rulers.
And then I imagine, well, maybe online now, but is there a special place you go to get these? That, when this is your business that you're doing and you need a special ruler or measuring instrument, where is that you go?
Um, Sometimes it's as simple as Amazon.
Oh, okay.
Uh, yeah. Other
Nowadays,
times,
right?
other times it's contacting people like companies that do laser cutting with acrylic.
Okay.
And I work with different engineers and I
Mhm,
say, this is what I'm needing. I'm having to do this type of shape all the
mhm.
time. Instead of me spending 30 minutes having to do
Sure.
this, is there a way that we can work together and
Okay.
create this? My last employer would do this frequently, and he actually created two rollers. We used to sell them, now they're no longer made.
Yeah.
Like this is actually used to make circles,
Oh, look at that. Wow.
even though it's a rectangle. And so when starting a circle skirt, all I need is this, and this creates a perfect
Great
circle of
circle.
every diameter I need.
Wow. That
Not
now
diameter, circumference.
circumference. I knew it. I knew where you
Yeah.
were going. Wow.
So this goes as low as small as 8 inches, just by here, a 67-inch circle. And then you can just attach a string and just keep going.
That's
Then we have
amazing.
my favorite ruler. This is a hip ruler. This is the actual shape of the human body. It was made by taking slices of the human body from 3D scans.
Oh,
It was
wow.
a part of one of the science museums. They
Hmm.
did a cadaver exhibit.
Hmm.
And so this this is actually the shape of your hip. We are not circles, we are not ovals, we are not trapezoid squares. We are a oblong trapezoid. And
Wow.
so with this, I can create the actual human shape.
That's amazing. Now, is that the hip looking down, like if you were going,
Yes, as if
so it's
you were
like it's
cut
this way, but
perfectly. Yes.
wow. That's amazing. So the fit is amazing. The fit is just wow. That's something.
To be at this level of making costumes, it is not just
Mm-mm.
sewing.
It's
It
yeah.
is it's engineering, it's mathematics, it's dealing with
Hmm.
aerodynamics, physics, chemistry. Um, One of my friends said that we are taking trigonometry and turning it into applicable forms,
Right.
where if you draw a straight line on a piece of paper, it's really like, well, that straight line could actually be the circle
Yeah.
going around my body or from here to here. And so there is no straight line
Yeah.
because the human body is three-dimensional. So we
Mhm.
have to be thinking in 2D and 3D simultaneously with every pattern we make.
Amazing. I mean, this is so fascinating, Jarod. Before we finish up, I want to ask you just like two questions. I want to
Hmm.
ask you what, for a dancer who's coming in to have a costume made, what is the most important thing that they should let their, I say seamstress, stitcher, whichever we're going to
Yeah.
call, what is the most important thing they have to let that person know? They're coming in fresh. You don't want to hide anything, right? Because you want the costume to be made well for you, and you don't want
Hmm.
any mistakes along the way. What should they say?
Some things could be as simple, excuse me, as simple as saying, I have scoliosis.
Mm-hmm.
Having your shoulders 1 inch higher on one side versus the other, it drastically changes how we're going to draft the pattern
Mm-hmm.
and make the outfit look even on you
Yes.
so that it doesn't look like you have scoliosis.
Yeah.
Like that's one example. Other things are you pregnant?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
are there any scars that you're aware of on your body that you don't want to be shown, or birthmarks, or like
Right.
anything like
Okay.
that?
Yep.
Because sometimes we'll have to say, well, this is the design,
Mm-hmm.
so now we have to figure out how to work with you to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that the design is happening for what the designer wants, but it's also you're at a comfortable level to where you don't feel like you're having to
Yeah.
cover yourself every time you're on stage.
Yeah.
So we are aware of that. Other things could be, we don't know what your choreography is.
Mm-hmm.
So when you come into a fitting, if you know you have something where your arms are going up and out and all these things, or you're having to do something for Cirque du Soleil and your
Mm-hmm.
leg is having to go up and around your
Yeah.
leg, if we don't know that and you just come into the fitting and you just stand there like
Mm-hmm.
a mannequin, well, great, we've done well for you standing there,
Yeah.
but you have to move. You
Yeah.
have to actually extend your body and show us what you have to be able to do, because that could
That
mean
makes sense.
we have to
Mm-hmm.
completely readjust the pattern. It could mean that we need to add jumbo or
Mm-hmm.
spandex or something into these spots that are hidden. That way you
Ah,
can move,
but we
but the
don't see
design
it.
is still exactly how it is.
Wow.
It's things like that. As much information without just oversharing
Mm-hmm.
that you can with us,
Yeah.
please tell us,
Tell us.
because we are engineers. It
Mm-hmm.
is our job to make sure this is happening, but we're also your psychiatrists, and we have to make sure that you're happy and
Yes,
everything's
because it
going
affects how you
okay.
perform. Yeah, if you're not comfortable in your costume, it affects
We
how.
are causing a mental struggle for
Yeah,
you
yeah,
that you shouldn't
yeah,
even be thinking
yeah,
about.
yeah, exactly. And what?
Don't, hold on,
No, no, go ahead.
don't come in and we are not designing it. We don't care if you don't like the design or not. If you don't like the design, tell the designer.
Designer. Yeah,
Yeah, like
yeah. Well, you're.
I get called a designer all the time. I'm like, technically, yes,
Mhm.
but that is not what my job is
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
So, and sometimes I think the design's ugly,
yeah,
but
yeah. Of course, yeah.
that's
That's
not for me to
not. It's
say.
not your. Yeah, no. Of course, it's. Yeah, that's so funny. What is something the non-sewers, not people who have no idea, they've never had a needle in their hand, a scissor in their hand, they never perhaps fixed a hole, sewed a button, anything like that. What could, I mean, we've covered a lot, but what can you tell us that they would never imagine about costume making?
Really, just how much math actually goes into this.
Mhm.
Like, yes, there's the design part of it, but even for me, when I first started learning how to sew and then started making patterns, very rarely, whenever you start learning how to make patterns on your own, or even if you go to Joanne Fabrics and you
Mhm.
get a McCall's pre-made pattern, or whatever style or brand you prefer, you're working with non-stretch fabric.
Mhm.
Stretch fabric, you actually have to do what's called negative ease.
Mhm.
Easing is when you take more fabric and you slightly ease it into the position that you need.
Mhm.
So if you have something that's 7 inches wide, but you've cut 8 inches wide of fabric, you just lightly ease it
Mhm.
in so it looks pretty. Negative ease is when if you need something that's 6 inches wide, but because it's stretched, if you do 6 inches of fabric, it's actually going to be too big. So you have to
Ah.
compensate by the amount of maximum stretch of a fabric, which could be anywhere from 3 to 20%.
Mhm.
Take your pattern, do the reverse math to shrink it down by that percentage so that when it's actually on, it has stretched out to the correct distance that it needs to be in those spots.
Wow, that just was like a lot of math for my
Yeah.
brain. No, but
No,
that's what it is. And for for the listeners who are interested in this, really, I mean, I'm laughing and making poking fun at myself, but it really is. Math is really important in that engineering
mhm.
aspect. It really, so if you want to do this, make sure your math is you're taking your math classes seriously. But I imagine if somebody wants to do this, they like math anyway. They must.
You'd be
Oh,
surprised
okay.
because some people have. It's also, if you don't like math,
Mhm.
you typically don't end up being a draper. You
Oh,
stick to being on the non-mathematical side. You're just on the
okay.
making side,
Right, right.
because it's very simple to use a sewing machine.
Mhm.
The hard part is actually learning how to touch the fabric as you're sewing it.
Mm-hmm.
This is another part,
Mm-hmm.
how you hold cotton
Mm-hmm.
as it's running through the sewing machine
Mm-hmm.
versus stretch wear versus chiffon versus
Yeah.
like an organza, or if
Mm-hmm.
you're sewing on grain,
Yeah.
which means like the fibers are going
Yep.
up and down, or cross grain, you've turned it 90
Mm-hmm.
degrees. So grain,
Yep.
cross
Cross
grain.
grain.
Then you can also use the fabric that's called bias.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
True bias is when it's turned exactly 45 degrees. And then bias is anything from 0 to 45 or 90 to 45. But
Wow. Okay.
45 is true
That's the true
bias.
bias. I did not know that.
And those will change the way you can actually manipulate the fabric by causing a non-stretch fabric to become stretch. And then same thing, a stretch fabric can actually lose its
I was just
stretch.
gonna, oh my gosh, I was just thinking that same thing. It's funny that you said that. Yeah, it can lose its stretch.
But the way it works with us for our drapers, the way they have to read the measurement sheets is I'm not going to get close because
Yeah,
it has
no, no,
names
no,
on it.
no, no, of course.
But you're given the design and then the pretty picture. The
Yeah.
technical word is a rendering. So you're
Okay.
given the rendering, and then you're given this measurement sheet. And just by looking at those numbers and where those numbers are, you have to be able to then hand draft that pattern. The only
Wow.
computers that are used in here are for email, making spreadsheets, shopping.
Yeah.
Everything else is
Man,
handmade.
I like that though. There's something artisan about it, you know? I don't know how you feel
Yeah.
about that, but I like that. And
Well,
if I like it, Jarod, then it matters.
well, I mean, it's as you said, you used the right word. We are artisans.
Yeah.
We are artists because
Yeah.
we're creating art, but we are artisans.
Mm-hmm.
We are making the tool that the dancer is wearing.
Yeah.
So the tool they're wearing is the costume, and they're the performing artist on stage.
Wow, Jarod, and this has just been another wonderful conversation. I enjoy it so much. I hope the listeners do as well. I'm sure they will. Is there any last things you want to say before we wrap up this part 2 of our little costume series that I'm so grateful to you for doing? This has been fun.
We'll just have to do a part 3.
I think we will. We're gonna have to do like seasonal or something special, or I don't know. My brain will get working. But
something as, to me, simple, but to a lot of people, they don't understand. We could do the entire anatomy of a tutu.
Oh my gosh, yep, right, fun.
That could be a whole episode.
To have a little series. I'm loving it. I do, and I thoroughly enjoy it, as you see. But again, Jarod, thank you so much for joining me on Dance Talk with Joanne Carey.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Follow us, like us, and share, share, share. Thank you, everybody.
Powered by Riverside.